Hello, everybody. Let's see some faces out there. If anyone wants to turn on their camera and join me so I can see some human beings, it'd be wonderful. Anybody out there? There we go. Hey, Sayori. Hey, Jackie. And I'm wondering, I can see a Nancy Lem who pops up every few years like a flower. All right, everybody. My name's Scott. You guys retreated real quick. And I'm just going to take you guys through a bunch of college list building tips, and we're going to kind of learn a little bit about the Blue List search engine that you guys are going to have access to. And I also want to address any questions that people may have about anything. The number one thing that we're getting these days is about AI, and I do want to address that when it comes to majors. But I also want to, just kind of talk about what we find to be so fun, which is building the college lists with so many students. We've been building college lists since 2001, and we've sent students to pretty much every school you can think of, dozens, if not hundreds, depending on the school. And we've seen all sorts of experiences. We've seen students, switch majors 4 times before they apply, and then 2 times after. But it's always a wild ride. And I think that the first thing that I like to do is really just kind of get down to basics. So one of the things that I'm going to put in the chat for you guys right now is I'm going to put a link to this little sheet here. And you guys can open it if you want, or you can bookmark it or save it. This is just the most simple way of thinking about colleges. And then as we're looking at this most basic of all basics, then we're going to also be diving into the Blue List and looking at schools in a much more fleshed out way and understanding kind of all the different ways that we can think about schools. And so the first thing, I'll just kind of go over the breakdown here. We're going to talk about fit first, major versus environment, which are the two things that everybody, you can't come in and do both when you first start a college list. So students will start with one, or they'll start with the other. And we'll talk about which students tend to lean into which side first. Eventually, they always braid together like a double helix. And you have to kind of factor both of those in when you're making your list. And then making a balanced list, which will, as we go through the Blue List itself, we will be looking at, the difference between reach schools, high targets, low targets, safe schools, which schools are going to generate the merit scholarships, which schools do we need test scores for, all that fun stuff. And then obviously we're talking about the balance list, and then also how to shape your list to get some merit scholarship offers. I would say at a Blue Train students, only about, I'm going to make a wild statistic here. I'd say only about 40% or fewer pay full price tag. And most of those students are just doing it because that's what they want to. If you build a good college list or a proportional college list, you should get plenty of merit scholarship offers as well. And a lot of students will say, well, I don't know if I have the numbers for that. Well, it's a sliding scale. Depending on what your numbers are, it will affect which ones are going to offer you money. And I'll show you guys how you guys can dig into that as well. And then we're going to talk about, just because this is really an overarching view of college list building. I'm talking about from the beginning to fit first to all the way to the end, which is workload and workflow. One of the common questions that we get from families is, what's a good number of schools to apply to? And, it depends on the student. Some students will, have a very kind of specific geographic requirement, like staying in California, and they just want to apply to the UCs and Cal States. And that's a pretty basic, application process. The UCs has 4 essays, the Cal States have none. So that's easy. Once you start getting into Common App schools, a lot of the privates, out-of-state publics, you will then start to add supplemental essays. And it's not necessarily about having a proportional list or a list that you want to spend all that money on applications, but will I be able to get all these essays done in quality form by the deadlines that are needed? A lot of the supplements don't come out until August. So this isn't important to really be doing until you're a senior. But it is something that when you're building your list, you're not getting crazy town and thinking about putting 30 schools on your list and saying you're going to apply everywhere, because that doesn't work. That just exhausts students and is unnecessary. But so I want to like stop for a second and talk about fit first. Like I said, I've been doing this for a long time. I recognize some names here, so I can see they're coming back for siblings. But one of the things that I realize is that a lot of people, if it's your first child going off to college, you sometimes have fear about the process. Will my child get in anywhere? If you're the student yourself, you're like, will I get in anywhere? And then there is the concern of cost of college. Then there is, what do I even want to study? How do I even pick a good school? What does a degree name really even mean? What the cost of college, the return on investment. So there's all these questions like spinning around the process. And I always bring people back to themselves, or I should say we. At Blue Train, there's 18 of us. So it's not all me. And so I always bring it back to the fit first, because someone will say, I'm a mechanical engineer, I love robotics, and I have taken these classes and I've won these awards. Where should I go? And that would be totally different answer depending on 5 different students. Even a student will, let's say a high achieving student is saying they want to apply to the Ivies. And I see this, and a family will show up and they have a college list with, all the Ivies at the top. And I said, if you put all the Ivy Leaguers in a giant gymnasium together, they don't hang out together. They would all kind of separate because they're different types of people. Question is, which schools do you fit into? So really kind of taking some time and thinking about who you are and what you want in school, out of a school, is the first step. Too many people hopscotch that and jump right into rankings, and they start thinking like, I'm just going to pick the best program that I read that students are making the most amount of money after 5 years in this major, even though I don't even like whatever it is, but I'm going to follow that path. And I understand that, because you're a teenager, things can be confusing, even for parents whose process was very different from this. So we understand why people are trying to find ways to navigate the process. But the first thing we would say is stop and look at yourself first. So what we encourage our students to do, and you don't need our portal to do this, this is just kind of going through your basics. What are the things you want? I want hands-on research. You kind of go through an idea of your wants. And some students will write things here. I want a place larger campus, or I want, and you would type these in, or if you're writing on a piece of paper, you'd write it in yourself. Like, I want a place, this is something I hear a lot. I want a place where I can make friends easily. Kind of sad, but you hear that all the time. It's not sad. It's just kind of worrisome. And I always tell students, college is I say middle school. I was telling a kid yesterday this. Middle school is like a nightmare for making friendships because of the clique system. High school is the second nightmare. College is the photo opposite of those in most cases. College is a very, very conducive atmosphere for people to make friends, to make connections, just to kind of start over again. And if you're social, you get to start over again as well. So a student will make their basics and they will start to think about schools, and then they will move over to actually thinking about the school itself. And so they will say to themselves, I want a school that is going to not have too many competitive people. It's going to be a school that's diverse, a school that's near a city. And they kind of know things that they want about the school, maybe about a major. Then when they actually start to build a list, or when I should say you guys start to build a list, the thing that we always see students come to is a fork in the road, major versus environment, because it's really difficult to just start out and say like, oh, I want to find, like, think about schools as like a complex prism, like I want to find 15 complex prisms that like have everything I want in them. And I just want to be able to do that by like a quick search, or even asking AI. It's not like that, because you got to think about the fit first. So you're the eye looking at the prisms, and you got to kind of find out what you find special in these schools. And if you try to do too many things at once, like for example, I want a great journalism program where I can get a master's in 5 years, and it has access to a city newspaper, and it has big sports, and the college town has a lot of diverse food options. And I'm like, great, that's a lot of great things. We can find schools at University of Michigan right there. But you can come up with things like that, but you also have to slow the student down and say, like, let's start kind of like moving groups. Like, let's start out with the big things first. And this here, I always bring this out. This is how the Blue List started. It was a cardstock thing where we would have families roll into community centers in the South Bay, and we would just give this out. And it would have all the data, and it would be organized in the two most important factors, and that's where I come down to environment. So the environment, we're going to say the student does not know his or her major, so they're going to start out with environment. Another student might say, like, I don't care about environment, I just want to find schools where I can do aerospace engineering. So we would just start out with the real basics there. But the two things that you come across pretty quickly is location and size. We used to call those the crosshairs. So if I'm looking at the location and I'm saying, all right, and I say to a student, and by the way, I should have said this earlier. At any time, if any of you guys want to ask a question, you can just drop it in the chat. I actually prefer if you just unmute your microphone and interrupt me and just ask with your voice, because small group here and it's totally doable. But if I'm going across something, when you're like, wait, what do you mean by that? Or is this an example of that? Or anything you want? This is we can move through everything fluidly. So questions included. So a lot of times we'll have a family, a lot of times when you're working with students, they will want to be alone. They'll say, Mom, Dad, get out of the room. I just want to do this. And I want to kind of think for myself and process with somebody else first. Some families want to do the whole process together. I think the more common thing is they do it half with us and half, half with just us and then half with the whole family. Usually the family is either in the beginning or the end, or they bookend it, because A, it is a family decision ultimately, but B, I think a lot of times the students want to kind of feel, themselves kind of stretching towards things and thinking about things in a way that is liberating for them. And so the first thing that always comes up is location. And we'll start out by saying, like, what states do you want to apply to? And some students were like, I don't know, I don't know the country. And you start talking to them like, all right, well, do you care about like weather? Are you someone that can handle the rain? No, you can't. Then let's go to these schools, or let's look for sunshine. And for people who, sometimes I'll see like sometimes a dad in the back like rolling his eyes, being like, is this really important? It's all important, because the best fits are the best experiences. So again, going back to the initial concept of fit first, stemming from knowing who you are and what you want, then you can kind of start to like go for things. And if you want to go for a school that is near a great surf break and that's one of your priorities, that's great, but that shouldn't be the driving force. If you are looking at business programs, you should probably be looking at some of these over here and kind of expanding your search. And our goal would always be to do that, but even on your own, you can always push yourself out of your comfort zone. Just geographically speaking, when we're talking to students, one of the things I'll say is, do you want comfort? And I think the majority of people I'm talking to right now are from California, if not all. And so comfort would normally mean even just like radius around your area in California. We would call radius schools the schools that are within driving distance pretty easily in a day. And I would say that includes Northern California if you're from Southern California, and vice versa. Those are radius schools. That is 1 foot like in your comfort zone, which is close to home, and just 1 foot eking out a little bit further. So you get a change, maybe a change of weather, a change of culture, but at the same time, you still feel very connected to what you're comfortable with. Then there are other students that are like, shoot me out of the cannon, coach. And they just want to go places that are, very new to them, very exciting because of the weather, that, all these different things that they can kind of explore that they've never seen before, the change of seasons, as I said. different cities. So students will kind of really kind of think geographically first, and then they will go to the size of campus. And we can talk about the majors next, but the size of campus is, a lot of times parents will encourage students to think about small schools. I'm not saying all parents, of course. And sometimes students like want small school and the mom or dad's like, how about a big school? There are pros and cons to both, and sometimes they're not the things we always think of. I think we always think of small schools as small class sizes and interactions with professors, because if we go to any schools here, I'll just, pull up a search. This is a small school. And one of the things you'll notice is when you guys use this, and we're gonna send an email to everyone with your code in it, and you'll be able to just log on tomorrow. When you do any search result, unless you change the sort order, it will always start out with the smallest school at the top. So I'm gonna look at a small school like Haverford, and faculty student ratio is 8:1. Now I'm going to go to a larger, well, these are still small. Let's go to a large school. Let's go to a school like Arizona State. 20:1, and even more compelling than the 20:1 student faculty ratio is that it's 110 degrees there right now. That is, it's hot, people. But another reason why I like checking the schools regularly and seeing different things like day-to-day temperatures, and I'll show you some live cams in a minute, but just the size of the school, of course, we think about small class sizes, which we just saw was a difference of 8:1 to 20:1, which makes a big difference. It makes the biggest difference in your freshman and sophomore year, because that's when your lecture centers will be larger. As you get older and you move up through the years, you end up most of the time having classes shrink in size. So that's one of the benefits. But also, if I go to a small school and I look at, let's go back to, stick to one here. I'll go here and I'm going to look at the departments and programs. All right, 70 majors. All right, that might sound like a lot. But if you do this for a living, you'd say that's not very many, because I'll just show you like a scroll. Okay, I'll get to the red zone GPA in just a minute, but absolutely that will be something we'll get to when we start talking about list proportion for sure. So we scroll here, see like this is the size of their total offerings, and let's go to a school just for comparison, like UT Austin. Let's go UT, open up. UT Austin, and we'll look at the number of majors that they have here. And we'll just see in each school, they're going to have quite a number of majors. So it's not only that you get more resources and bigger classes, but you also get more professors teaching more majors, and also more different courses per major, because professors have different specialties. So what you gain in big schools is more diversity of course offerings and majors, and what you lose is class size and attention. But then there's also the personal side of the size of school. Some students talk to all the time, they want the big campus, the rah-rah sports. Other students really want, the small kind of place where they can isolate and think about things. All right, I'm going to bring you guys into a school. Let's just stick with Austin since I think we're there. Because the question popped up, because we're going to be going through this profile. Anytime you open up, look, it's not ungodly in Austin. It's only 89. The first thing is this student has entered their GPA into the back end in the profile, and you guys will be able to do that over here. Now, let me just kind of show you guys something else so you don't worry. First of all, we'll be sending out this recording. Second of all, there's this section here, how to list, that has like 3 to 5 minute videos about all the different things, like, about the red zone GPA. And we add these like every week. There's another 1 or 2 here, because we're just launching. But so you can always go in and get more granular there. But if we open up some schools, we just pull up a full list. And if I go, I'll go to Boulder. So on the back end, I entered my GPA, and it tells you how to calculate it. And there's a calculator you can use if your transcript doesn't have it. But we like using the 10th and 11th weighted academic GPA. And then we call the red zone the area that is not an average GPA, but rather the low end for admitted students. So the reason why we did this is because when families are looking at schools and they're thinking about, which schools can I get into, they start reading statistics like, let me see if this says it here. Acceptance rate of 81%. Or they'll look at like Stanford, acceptance rate of 7%. And they go, that's cool. One's higher and one's lower, but I have no idea if I can get in there. And then they will go on their high school's Naviance program and look at a scatter plot. And that's very confusing to them as well. Ultimately, all students are trying to do is assess their odds so that they can build a list where they can reach as high as they possibly can while still maintaining a firm foundation. And the foundation is where you get the merit scholarships as well. But so a student will want to make sure that they have that stretched proportionality as much as possible. So what we realized when we were looking at our surveys since 2001, the number one indicator, everything else, if you just strip down to the one thing that told us the most about a student's odds of getting into a school, it was their 10th and 11th weighted GPA. Reason being is freshman year, a student may have done great, but some schools have a lot of APs and honors, other schools have none. So a lot of colleges don't really look at freshman year to apples that way because schools have unfair advantages. Secondly, that's why the UCs only use 10th and 11th. Secondly, that is the furthest away in the history of you as a student. So if you are somebody who did great in freshman year, but then did poorly second semester junior year, that's not going to bode well as far as they're concerned. So what you want to be finding is like, what is that key point? So what we realize is that, with a lot of schools being test optional, as you can see here, this is where all your admissions information is in here for all your schools, SAT, ACT. The GPA tends to be the paramount element. Yes, of course, essays matter, activities matter, awards matter, a lot of things matter. But if you're just trying to build a list that has a level of proportion, it's mostly going to be your GPA and then the school and your major. So those are the triangle elements. So where we come up with these numbers, or how we come up with this number, is we look at where students are consistently accepted to the point where they're more consistently getting waitlisted and or rejected. So at Boulder, a student with a 10th and 11th red zone or a 10th and 11th GPA that is below a 3.5 is looking kind of sketchy. They're going to need an SAT score or a grade essay or something to save them. And you will see whenever you open up a school, the sides of the school will be the color that will be represented when you go over to your list over here. In general, I think that something like this looks like a good list. I would say that some students will apply to a few more schools because they can see that they can get a lot of bang for their buck. So they may add UCLA, they may go over here to our lists, and they may go to the UCs. Where's the UCs here? And they may just kind of make a run on them. And sometimes students will leave out Merced or leave out Riverside for Merced and Riverside. But Riverside's fantastic for pre-med matriculation and has a strong business program. So I encourage students to look at that. And then so once the students are building their list, it's kind of like along the lines of the Amazon shopping cart theory. You build up a lot of schools and then you start to kind of play Jenga and reduce it once you get closer. But in the beginning, when you are looking at schools, do your searches, set your parameters. You can select your majors. You can select what are called vibe tags. So you can find out, I want a college town, I want a Gothic architecture, blah, blah, blah. And you can set all those, and you can also save your searches. So you don't have to keep, resetting them, and they're over here. So let's pull one up that we did already. This is going to be sports management schools in the Northeast, Northwest, and Midwest. And so the student now knows that these schools are all hitting that major, and they can like go through the schools, and we'll open up a school like Michigan. And this is where I think the rubber meets the road, because I can tell you guys all day, have 5 reaches, 5 safes, 5 targets, maybe a few more if you can add more in. I would say on average, don't get scared. But I think Blue Train students do tend to have a few more schools than average. I think partially, if you really think about the process and you really think about it as an efficiency system, and you realize that, oh, I have an application that's all set. Michigan State and Indiana don't have any supplemental essays because I can just one click and find that out. And Berkeley's on the UC app. Then you start to realize that it's really easy for your list to build without any more extra work. And I think a lot of families are willing to spend an extra $70, $140, $350, about $70 per application to increase the number of odds. Because if you think about the cost of college, $350 is nothing. So ultimately, when I said the rubber meets the road, what I think that students will too often do is they'll hear a name of a school and they'll put it on their list and they won't investigate it any further, or they'll hear like, oh, it's easy to get in that school, and they'll be dismissive of it. And I will tell students again and again, there are so many things you can learn about a school. So like Michigan, I'm just going to show you guys some of the basic things you can do. So I'm going to look at the weather and like, oh, that's really cold. Do I want to be someplace that cold in the winter time? These are the averages per month. And so you go through that. I'll look at the politics of a school. And obviously, students seem more fluid than the adults these days. So most students can fit into one of 3 categories, if not more. So if a student is, let's say, very liberal, they can usually fit into these 3, or if they're very conservative, they can fit into those 3, or if they're balanced, they can fit in those. And we usually do the 3/5 thought with students. Some students don't even want to talk about it, so you don't make that an issue. But if students and parents want to learn more about the actual school and what's going on, this will tell you everything that's going on in that state, politically speaking. So you can learn about that. Diversity, 50-50. So you can go through and kind of see if how that breaks down in terms of importance here. A lot of students care about what the sport scene is going to be like. What's it going to be like if I'm going to be, a student who's going to be, attending these games. So we connected these to all the reels. So it's not the posts. So it's actually the reels. Instagram, people know what I'm talking about. So this way you can just look at live footage of all the sports teams. And there's Greek life. You can check that out. And then if you want to check out how far it is to a campus, because some of you guys, the big question you will always ask is, how many schools should I be visiting before I'm applying? Truth of the matter is, most students / families will apply to a good number of schools that they have not visited. So do not feel obligated to visit every single school on your list. What a lot of families will do is they will visit a number of schools, they will learn about those schools, and then that will be information they can extrapolate and be like, oh, you liked Michigan, you might like Wisconsin. Oh, you liked, Swarthmore, you might like Haverford. And so it is nice to do that. And we would always recommend, when in doubt, start local. If you're in California, go to a UC, go to USC, go to LMU, go to a San Diego school, go Santa Barbara up to San Francisco. There's so many schools that you can learn so much. Occidental, the Claremont schools. You can learn a lot just by kind of, day trips, go get lunch and go to Claremont or Harvey Mudd. And then if you want to, check out the flight distance, you can check out here. I just bought tickets this way the other day, because you can see how much it costs, because families will realize schools that have direct flights are a lot easier and cheaper to get to. So you can do all that stuff. Campus radio, I'm not going to click it, but I think that the students that actually do click on the campus radio have a lot of fun with it. I will say I've even sent this to some of my friends because I know they're big music people, and they like love like, oh man, University of Michigan's radio station's great, or Cal Poly Slow won best radio station in America last year. Because college radio stations every hour on the hour, the DJs change, and so you get like a cultural feel of the school because you'll have a couple of students in there talking about the game or something on campus. Or I was listening, my son's at UCLA, and I was listening about the, like what was going on in LA through the radio station. And then you just kind of get a sense of the school as well, which is really fun. Then you can come down here. And I'm encouraging everybody to do this with schools, whether you use this search engine or you find your own way around. These are things that really help you understand about the school. So obviously there's always looking at, images of schools because you can get a feel of the campus. Again, not silly. Then you can go to the playlists. We have the YouTube channel from the school, which is helpful because they lay things out like dorms, dining halls, but also we create our own playlist for every school because we really want you guys to be able to see the pros and cons. All this stuff starts out with like overviews of the schools. So cruise around, check out schools, but then go into like, like what's the real talk, like it's really clicky here, or, you really have to have a lot of money because everyone travels on weekends, or whatever they say about the school, or what tailgating's like, or is it too much of a party school if you are an engineering major, or whatever it might be. So playlists are helpful. And then my secret favorite thing is, I'll go down over here, things to see and do. I'll grab some place. Let's see. Let's go to a coffee place. I'm gonna go to Comet Coffee. So I'll copy and paste that. And every school, you will have the access, like 3D drop-in to the campus. And of course, you can always just, cruise around and poke around. A lot of our students will do this when they're writing their supplemental essays, because you can get so much in videos, but you get a lot just by kind of going in, because we can drop in anywhere. So if I'm going to put in this place, this coffee shop, and it's going to, all right, so now not only do I know where it is, but I also know it's right adjacent to the campus, and I can drop in here and check it out. Wherever the heck we are. Oh, it looks like a mall. This is kind of creepy. Oops. But yeah, let me open that up. Oh, it's the arcade. So that's what it is. And so, students will drop into dorms, they'll drop into the student unions, they'll drop into the quads. They'll just get a sense of, everything that is going on campus. And if you do enough drop-ins, you really get a feel. I promise you, if you do this and you go visit a campus, you'll feel like you kind of know where everything is already. So obviously we encourage that. Checking out the clubs and activities, checking out the rankings, reviews, all that stuff. This all goes back to the environment. Where am I going to be living? Who am I going to be living with? What am I going to be doing with my time, right? So that's the one person. The other person is the person, and both of these lead towards these other three things down here, but the other person is going to be focusing on the major. These are the students that are like, cool story about the Google Earth or the snow or the seasons. I just want a place that I have a great maker space and can be working on submersible aquatics. Or, it's really cool that it's near a city or a big college town, but ultimately, all I really care about is if they have a pre-veterinary program so that I can, get a vet degree within 6 years. And so those students are very pre-professional oriented. Those are students that track sometimes towards schools like Cal Poly Slow or Northeastern or Drexel, where the curriculums are turned upside down and you're not starting out with gen eds and feeling your way towards a major, but you're going straight towards your major. And or it might just be that a student will use their very strong feelings about their major to build the initial list completely major based. So we'll have a student that will come and say, look, I want to go for, let's find a major. I want to go for criminology. And I know that's not at a lot of schools because it's criminal justice, which is like prison reform and law and society and, police reform. And then there's criminology, which is all the true crime kids. They like that stuff, forensic science, etc. So then you go to a school, and now I know this is all only my criminology majors. I would not recommend clicking multiple majors at one time and then pulling up a search, because then what happens is you don't know what major to look at what school. Because if I did criminology and psychology, you can, and a lot of people do that because they're just looking for school batches. But then I can go here, and I'm going to go to the course catalog. If there's one thing you take away from tonight, I'd really like you to take away the fact that course catalogs can be your best friend. I cannot tell you how many times we've had a student sitting in front of a major, and they keep saying, yeah, I want to be a chemistry major. And then they realize they want to be a chemical engineering major. Then they realize they want to be a material science major. Then they realize they want to be a product development person. And so you see people start to evolve as they look at course catalogs. And so this is one, forensic science, which is the same as criminology. The student will look at this, then they can, read all the courses, pretty graphic. But this might be what a student loves, like, oh, that's right up my alley. Or a student might open up, history at one school, and it looks like a textbook. Everything's very chaptered, by century, etc., by location. And another history program might look like it's ripped out of today's headlines, where it's very kind of catchy, snazzy course titles. A lot of the smaller schools will do that, where the professors like mark schools with their personality, their courses, I mean. So looking at course catalogs can tell you about the school's personality, what they offer. So let's say if I go to, for example, Drexel. This is a pre-professional school where students can jump right into what they want to do. And I can go to like the department page, which is helpful, or I can always go to the website up here and do a search. A lot of times you'll see us when we're working, we're just like, let's look for, let's see, I want to do like film product. Yeah, I want to look at if they have a film portfolio, and I'll just kind of go that way. And then once I find something, I can take it, drag and drop it over here. And now I can, have that note that I want over there. But I was going to go to the course catalog and show you guys. So like this school here, it's pre-professional. I go to film and TV production. There's so many courses that feel really hands-on. And then I'll go to another one, and it's all just sitting in a classroom and watching movies. But that student might have thought both of those programs were identical because the majors sound exactly the same. We did our best as possible for you guys to make these distinguishing factors in our major like list here. For example, I was just looking at film, and we looked at all the course catalogs, and we separate the film production to separate from film studies. We distinguished between criminal justice and criminology, between communications interpersonal, which is like for the parents out there, this is like the communications major we remember, like how do you talk to people? How do you kind of interact in groups and solo? But communications these days is almost more like marketing. It's about using the internet and media to send messages. So there's that. Then there's environmental science, environmental studies. I won't go through all of them. International business, international relations. But we tried to do our best to make it so that when you are clicking a major, it's pulling up your exact major that you're looking for. And then so what you start to do is you start to build your list, right? You have a big tall, fat list of all these schools that you like for any reason. I liked the fact that Santa Barbara, check out the live cam, Santa Barbara, oh, they're not recording. They're not showing. Actually, while I'm talking, I'll show you guys cool live cam. So you start to go through the schools and you start to kind of live with them a little bit. And what I mean by live with them is you keep them on your list. And I have a kid right now, he's a senior, he's on the wait list for this school. And it's a very competitive school, but he wanted to, I think this is the day that this is the time lapse of the graduation, but these are on live cams. But he's watching these live cams. He listens to the radio station. He went out to 3 campuses. He was on the wait list and talked to all the people, like telling them how much he's been investing in the school. 2 of the 3, the admissions officers called him when he got home and accepted him off the wait list directly. This year's been magical off the wait lists. But when I say live with the schools, you're coming back, you're checking out radio stations, you're watching another video, you're making another note, you're reading another review, you're going on a campus tour, you're checking out the dorms. Because if you try to do this stuff all at once, it's exhausting. But if you make this experience fun, if you really see this as something that shouldn't be like taking your medicine, but it should be something that's like shopping for a new car, a new house, or whatever is exciting to you. Because college is amazing, everybody. Like, one of the reasons why we love this so much is because we're helping you guys, or in this case, using the Blue List, you're helping yourself find not only an experience that's going to help you with your life in terms of getting a career, but also it's going to, a lot of times it's refractory. It's going to change who you are, the path of who you become. And so really kind of doing your due diligence to kind of find a great place. And then also, knowing that there's so much money out there that if you build your list in a certain way, you can capture a lot of scholarships. We have every year students going into the process. Oh, I'm not going to, I have a, 501k. Don't need to kind of get a scholarship. And then they get money thrown at them and they're like, well, maybe we can use that for grad school. Maybe we can do it for whatever. My son, we said, you choose this school, you pay, you have no money left over. You choose this school on a scholarship, which you got, we're going to actually have extra money. So that'll be a little bit of money you can start your life with. So, making a college list will also identify how you guys can make money, that way. We call a light bulb shaped list one where students put too many reach schools at the top. They're not going to get a lot of scholarships. Proportional is like the one we saw that I showed you. And a pear-shaped is where you have a lot of safe schools at the bottom. And safe schools, a lot of times, are underrated because they're amazing. I talk about Boulder or, San Diego State for some students. There's a lot of great programs out there. And then, as I said, workflow and workload, you don't really need to be thinking about that at this stage of the game, unless you're a rising senior. Otherwise, you really should be just kind of having fun with the process. And then just remember at the end of the day, when you are taking that big, tall list and you are kind of breaking it down into kind of, your actual finalized list, that the workflow and workload will come into play. Kind of jammed through a lot in 45 minutes. I can always dive back into a lot of things, but I want to kind of stop for a second and take a sip of water, first of all. But second of all, I would love any question anyone has about anything related to colleges, like college list building, because a lot of times students will have thoughts or parents will have questions, but then they won't think it's connected, but it really is connected. So anyone have any questions about, like, what does it take to get into the UCs these days? What does it take to get into a certain school? How important is testing? Like, anything I can answer, I will. Come on, shy people. All right. If you're gonna, so I will answer my own questions. Oh, yeah. So does weighted GPA matter, or B or C in a particular subject matter a lot? So, because academics are the backbone of your application, there's no doubt about it. So if I go here and let's say this is a student who has, let me I got a student with some grades. Jane Blue Chain. All right. So let's say that, we have, this is just a mock 4-year course load for a student. The colleges obviously care about what happens junior year the most. Students hear that ad nauseum, like the most important year is junior year. I actually go one step further to be even more nauseating and explain that the first semester senior year is almost the most critical of all your semesters, which is really why when we are encouraging families to make course selections, to kind of go for the best course load you can where you still think you can get straight A's, because a lot of schools are asking for that update before they make their decision. And if you're on the borderline, they want to see you, improving. Someone just asked about getting B's or C's. It is more, or I should say, earlier the better with those. If you have a rough patch, it's always better to kind of get it over with and then show them that you've kind of righted the plane and things are going well. What students will sometimes do is they will have a rough patch here, and then they will try to overload themselves the next semester with good intentions, but then in trying to fight back, they end up just kind of throwing themselves out of control. And the most important thing is A's before APs. If you have to kind of lighten your load and kind of keep the courses stable so that you can get more A's, then we would suggest that. And then you can always turn up the rigor, but don't try to catch up if you had a really bad semester by throwing too much rigor, hoping that the weighted GPA is going to pull you out, because they're going to be looking at the letters. If you have, and I'll jump to the other question I just saw come in, but if you have a bad grade or 2 or 3 or 4 later in the progression, like not in freshman or sophomore year, but in junior year, we would recommend using the additional information box on the applications, whether it's the Common App or the UC app. You're going to have a section in, again, you don't need to know what I'm showing you here, but just to know it exists. There's a section called additional information where students will write about things that went wrong. This happened, I was too overwhelmed, I had a sport, I got sick, I was depressed, or whatever it might be. My son made his funny, he got a C, and he just talked all about having the cheese touch, like that movie, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and just socially out of it. So you can really make up some ground there. But overall, your goal is always to kind of have a steady course load, and especially in your cores. Someone else has a question came in. It says, what's a college list building without politics? So that question has, that brings up to a very important point as well. Politics and AI, not together. Politics, I don't know, a lot of families have asked me if we've noticed a change in how students are thinking about international schools, and or how international schools are thinking about, students are thinking about coming here. That's one. We have seen, one of my students said yesterday, because our wait list, as I said before, have been miraculous this year. Students have just been like a pegboard, just getting off one wait list after another, and they just keep getting into schools that they're not expecting to. Some people attribute that maybe there was an evacuation of some international students. As far as next year, your guess is as good as mine what is going to be happening there. But I do feel like that sometimes students do get spooked, and people do make these decisions a year or 2 out. So there might be some situations that you will see people will, you just keep your finger to the wind on, which schools are having situations. But the thing I really wanted to bring up is AI, because it tends to be a very big topic when you get one-on-one with a family, and they say, we want to do computer science, but we hear in 10 years AI is going to be doing a lot of their coding, or I want to do architecture and yada yada yada. And so this really brings a lot of students to an intersection that no one has ever been in before. Yeah, maybe there was the industrial revolution and the, the tech revolution, but this is a different type of revolution. So obviously I have to be obsessed about this stuff. I have to be reading about it. I have to be listening to podcasts about it, watching videos about it. It's almost become consuming. But I do feel like I've gotten a better understanding. I play with AI all the time. The Blue List, we are integrating AI in it and just experimenting with it. And I'm sure a lot of you in your fields are playing with it, and you're seeing how many amazing things it can do, how many things it can't do, how many things it's projected to do. And so with this kind of landscape that's like this rolling wave that seems to be accelerating, the first thing is I say, let's not fear it because we can't change it, right? So the thing is, um, how do we kind of plan for it? And I think that the first thing the first thing we do recommend our students to understand is that it's really important to be studying what you like. Because if you're trying to go ahead and study something with the plan that what the job market's going to look like, and you don't necessarily like it, like we have students do that. They'll do like, well, I don't really like numbers, but I'll do accounting. I don't really like science, but I want to do dermatology or whatever they say. Those are two weird ones, but and ultimately, what you really find out is a lot of students have deep interests, and if you really talk to them about their deep interests, it might be like for my son, it ended up being music industry, and for another student, it might be, it might be physical therapy, but they don't think that's a job that they could get to all the way to the end of schooling with. So I would say maybe think about physiology or whatever the student is thinking about. It's like you try to move them towards where they really, really are interested. And that's where those course catalogs come in. Because if a student looks like course catalogs, even if they don't know the all the different courses they're looking at, it's like looking at a menu in another language, but you get the basics, the food, the chicken, the tomatoes. You're like, all right, I like that. So looking at course catalogs will teach you a lot. And if a student is excited about studying something, that's a great thing. Then where are they going to get skills, not just get a degree? Like, oh, I get a really good name on my degree. I'm going to be an economics major, but it's going to be all theoretical, and I don't really know what to do with that. Are they going to have any skills? I'm going to be a film studies major. I'm going to be able to watch films, but AI is going to be able to make better reviews. So like, that's not really helpful. So you really need to think about things you're passionate about first. And then secondly, think about the fact that AI and jobs are going to be driven by curiosity and breadth of knowledge. So that's why a lot of schools are predicting the return of the liberal arts major. That's why you see schools doing things like our first time in years, we have students interested in like what are called the 3-2 engineering programs. These are engineering programs where students will go to a liberal arts school for the first 3 years, get a bachelor's degree, and then they will move to a top tier school like Columbia or Caltech or Vanderbilt, and they will do 2 years and they will get an engineering, like an ABET certified engineering degree. And that student will then have the ability to understand multiple disciplines, and they will be able to have, and also a skills-based degree. So you see students kind of like looking at things like that, and they go, huh. And so whenever I'm talking to a student, I say, still dig into your curiosity. I mean, this isn't an activity shaping discussion, but if it were, we always talk about the golden triangle: courses, activities, and major, and those things kind of all light each other up. And so if a student is kind of paying attention to what they like, and say they like the ocean, and then they start, get scuba certified, and then they take AP environmental science, and people are worried like, well, what's the job market? I would say if there's a genuine interest growing, you can always, look at other majors as well that might be more practical based, but really pay attention to those things that interest you, everybody. That's like critical. And then also think about maybe what are ways that you can widen things out. I have a lot of students now think about minors, and they like when we're not just looking at schools, because you don't apply to a college with a minor, but now you're like, huh, maybe I'll be instead of a comp sci major, I'll be a finance major with a comp sci minor. And like you see people moving things around because they're trying to see how they can get as much broad based while still having like trenchant, like, or deep cutting skills. Yeah, so I know I blasted through a lot. I know it was probably like a fire hose of like me lying at you guys and also flicking through things on the blue list. But I'm hoping that, when we send you guys the coupon code tomorrow, you don't have to like log in right away, but when you do, I hope that you take the time. There's so many things I didn't even get to show you guys on here, uh, and start to build your list and, save it. And if you want to, you can always, enroll in it, or you can always, if you're a Blue Trainer, you get all of our tech for free. But I just think at the very least, having some fun and diving in and clicking around in some schools and kind of getting your feet wet with the college search process, even if it's something that you're going to be delaying, for another year or two, maybe just take the month, or if you're the student, just click around, watch some videos, listen to some radio stations, some live cams, drop in, read some course catalogs. Don't feel any pressure. Got 2 minutes left. If anyone has any questions out there, I'd be happy to answer them about anything. But as you're thinking of a question, I will say, don't be scared about the college process. This year was fantastic returns. I have a feeling it's going to be that way again next year. And, because everyone's always concerned that it gets harder and harder every year. And I feel like that the schools have really found their footing with test optional versus test blind versus test mandatory. So that helps you see windows into schools. I think students are becoming more flexible with their majors, and that allows them to build multi-pronged lists. Families are also thinking more about, merit scholarships, and that enables them to kind of build a list that might be more inclusive with some schools they might have thought of. So, it's a journey, everybody. I'm going to be letting you all go in a minute. And tomorrow, in addition to the coupon, we'll kind of, put a link there if anybody's interested in doing a meet and greet with Blue Train. And I know some of you guys already have done it, but those of you who haven't, we love to have a counselor sit with you, meet your family, and just talk things through with you. If not, otherwise, have a great summer and have a great college process, no matter what. My pleasure. Bye, guys. Take care.